As the ship tried to escape, a flurry of bubbles followed her. Very few ships could outrun a torpedo, and she was not one of them. As it struck the ship, a column of water exploded into the air and the sound of splitting steel roared in everyone's ears. But how would the crew escape? Welcome to Shipwreck Sunday. My name is Eleanor. Just a quick disclaimer for a younger audience before we dive in. This story may be disturbing to some, so viewer discretion is advised. Okay everyone, let's get into it. SMS Pommern, which was recommended by one of you lovelies, was one of 5 Deutschland-class pre-dreadnought battleships built for the Kaiserliche Marine between 1904 and 1906. The passing of the Second Naval Law in 1900 under the direction of Vice Admiral Alfred von Tirpitz secured funding for the construction of 20 new battleships over the next 17 years. The first grouping was the Braunschweig class, laid down in the early 1900s, and shortly following them were the follow-up class, the Deutschland class. These ships were broadly similar to their predecessors, with incremental improvements in armor protection. They also abandoned the gun turrets for the secondary battery guns, moving them back to traditional casemates to save weight. The British battleship HMS Dreadnought was commissioned in December of 1906, and her revolutionary design rendered every capital ship of the German Navy obsolete, including the Deutschland class. Pommern, named after the Prussian province of Pomerania, was laid down at AG Volkenstetten, Germany Yard on March 22, 1904. Pommern was launched on December 2, 1905 and was commissioned 2 years later when she was completed on August 6, 1907. Before we get too far into her story, let's stop and look at the specs. Pommern was a Deutschland-class battleship with her displacement sitting at 12,983 long tons standard and 13,993 long tons fully loaded. She was 418 feet 8 inches long overall, had a beam of 72 feet 10 inches wide, and a draft of 26 feet 11 inches deep. She was equipped with 2 heavy military masts and triple expansion steam engines that were rated at 17,453 indicated horsepower, which were fed by 12 Schultz-Thornycroft boilers and turned 3 screws. With this setup, she had a top speed of 18 knots, though she exceeded that speed on trials, and she was the fastest and most fuel-efficient of her class. In fact, during her speed run, she reached 19.26 knots, making her the fastest pre-dreadnought battleship in the world. She had 3 funnels that vented smoke from burning coal in her boilers, and she had a fuel capacity of 1,520 long tons of coal. At a cruising speed of 10 knots, she could steam for 5,830 nautical miles. Her crew complement consisted of 35 officers and 708 enlisted men. Next, let's look at her armor and armament. As for armor, Krupp cemented armor protected her. Her armored belt was 9.4 inches thick in the central portion, where it protected her magazines and machinery spaces, while thinner plating covered the ends of the hull. Her main deck armor was 1.6 inches thick. The main battery turrets also had 11 inches of armor plating. As for guns, her primary armament consisted of 4 11-inch SKL 40 caliber guns in 2 twin turrets. Her offensive armament was rounded out with a second battery of 14 6.7-inch SKL 40 caliber guns mounted individually in casemates. A battery of 22 3.5-inch SKL 45 caliber guns in single mounts provided defense against torpedo boats. She was also armed with 6 17.7-inch torpedo tubes, all submerged in the hull, with 1 in the bow, 1 in the stern, and 4 on the broadside. Despite the fact she wasn't as advanced as Dreadnought, she'd still put up a hell of a fight. If you're enjoying this video, leave me a like, subscribe to the channel for more content, and let me know down in the comments section below. Okay, let's look at her career. Pommern was assigned to the 2nd Battle Squadron of the High Seas Fleet alongside her sisters, replacing the battleship Kurfürst Friedrich Wilhelm, though she wasn't fully ready for active duty until November 11, 1907. Pommern participated in fleet maneuvers in February of 1908 in the Baltic Sea and more fleet training off Helgoland in May to June. In July, Pommern and the rest of the fleet sailed into the Atlantic Ocean to conduct a major training cruise. Prince Heinrich had pressed for such a cruise the previous year, arguing that it would pair the fleet for overseas operations and would break up the monotony of training in German waters, though tensions with Britain over the developing Anglo-German naval arms race were high. The fleet departed Kiel on July 17th, passed through the Kaiser Wilhelm Canal to the North Sea, and continued on to the Atlantic. The fleet returned to Germany on August 13th, and the annual autumn maneuvers followed from August 27th to September 12th. Later that year, the fleet toured coastal German cities as part of an effort to increase public support for naval expenditures. The next year of 1909 was much the same. In March of 1911, the fleet conducted exercises in the Skagerrak and Kattegat. Pommern and the rest of the fleet received British and American naval squadrons in Kiel in June and July. This year's autumn maneuvers were confined to the Baltic and the Kattegat. Another fleet review was held during the exercises for a visiting Austro-Hungarian delegation that included Archduke Franz Ferdinand and Admiral Rudolf Montecuccoli. In mid-1912, due to the Agadir crisis, the summer cruise only went into the Baltic to avoid exposing the fleet during the period of heightened tension with Britain and France. Pommern took part in several celebrations commemorating the 50th anniversaries of events from the Second Schleswig War. The first, on March 17th, took place at Swinemunde, on the anniversary of the Battle of Jutland, and she participated in ceremonies at Sonderburg on May 2, 1914, to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Dyalla. In July of 1914, about 2 weeks after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo, Pommern was with the High Seas Fleet during its annual summer cruise to Norway. As a result of rising international tensions, the cruise was cut short and the German fleet was back in Wilhelmshaven by July 29th. At midnight on August 4th, the UK declared war on Germany for violating Belgium's neutrality. Pommern remained with the High Seas Fleet throughout the first 2 years of the naval war. At the outbreak of the war, the German command deployed the 2nd Squadron in the German Bight to defend Germany's coast from a major attack from the Royal Navy that the Germans presumed was imminent. Pommern and her squadron mates were stationed in the mouth of the Elbe to support the ships on patrol in the Bight. Soon it became clear that the Royal Navy was not going to attack the High Seas Fleet, so the Germans began a series of operations designed to lure out part of the numerically superior British Grand Fleet and destroy them. The German Navy was aiming to force a decisive battle in the southern portion of the North Sea after achieving a rough equality of forces. Pommern and the rest of the 2nd Squadron then rejoined the High Seas Fleet as part of the battleship support for the battlecruisers in the 1st Scouting Group that bombarded Scarborough, Hartlepool, and Whitby on December 15th and 16th of 1914. The main fleet acted as distant support for Counter-Admiral Franz von Hipper's battlecruise squadron while it raided coastal towns. On the evening of December 15th, the fleet came to within 10 nautical miles of an isolated squadron of 6 British battleships. However, skirmishes between the rival destroyer screens in the darkness convinced the German fleet commander that the entire Grand Fleet was deployed before him. Under orders from Wilhelm II to avoid battle if victory was not certain, they broke off the engagement and turned the battle fleet back towards Germany. 2 fruitless fleet advances followed on the 17th to the 18th and the 21st to the 23rd of April of 1915. A third took place on May 17th to the 18th, and a fourth occurred on October 23rd to the 24th. On April 24th to the 25th of 1916, Pommern and her sisters joined the dreadnoughts of the High Seas Fleet to support battle cruisers, which were again tasked with conducting a raid of the English coast. While en route to the target, a mine damaged the battlecruiser Seydlitz. She was detached to return home, and the rest of the ships continued with the mission. Due to poor visibility, the battlecruisers conducted a brief bombardment on the ports of Yarmouth and Lowestoft. The operation was quickly called off, preventing the British fleet from being able to intervene. The heat was on for the Germans, and Pommern would get burned. Thank you so much to our amazing YouTube members and patrons. If you'd like to have some awesome perks like episodes a full day in advance, join our YouTube memberships today. Okay, it's time to get into the Battle of Jutland. Vice Admiral Reinhard Scheer, the new commander of the High Seas Fleet, immediately planned another foray into the North Sea, but the damage to Seydlitz delayed the operation until the end of May. On May 31st, at 2 a.m. Central European Time, Hipper's battlecruisers steamed out towards Skagerrak, followed by the rest of the High Seas Fleet an hour and a half later. Pommern remained assigned to the 2nd Battle Squadron, which was positioned at the rear of the German line and under the command of Franz Mauve. During the run to the north, Scheer ordered the fleet to pursue the British 5th Battle Squadron at top speed. The slower Deutschland-class ships could not keep up with the faster dreadnoughts and quickly fell behind. By 7:30 p.m., the Grand Fleet had arrived on the scene and confronted Scheer with significant numerical superiority. The German fleet was severely hampered by the presence of these slower Deutschland-class ships. If Scheer ordered an immediate turn towards Germany, he would have to sacrifice the slower ships to make good his escape. Scheer decided to reverse the course of the fleet with the battle about turn, a maneuver that required every unit in the German line to turn 180 degrees simultaneously. As a result of having fallen behind, Pommern and the rest of her squadron could not conform to the new course following the turn, so Pommern and the other 5 ships were located on the disengaged side of the German line. Mauve considered moving his ships to the rear of the line, astern of the 3rd Battle Squadron dreadnoughts, but decided against it when he realized the movement would interfere with the maneuvering of Hipper's battlecruisers. Instead, he attempted to place his ships at the head of the line. Later in the evening of the first day of the battle, the hard-pressed battlecruisers of the 1st Scouting Group were being pursued by their British opponents. Pommern and the other so-called 5-minute ships came to their aid by steaming in between the opposing battlecruiser squadrons. Pommern could not make out a target in the darkness, but several of her sisters could, though their shooting was ineffective. The British battlecruisers scored numerous hits on the German ships, including one on Pommern by a 12-inch shell fired by Indomitable, forcing her to haul out of line. Mauve ordered an 8-point turn to the south to disengage from the British, and they did not follow. At 3:10 a.m. on the morning of June 1st, Pommern was torpedoed by the British destroyer Onslaught. At least one torpedo and possibly a second struck the ship, detonating one of the 17-centimeter ammunition magazines. An enormous explosion broke the ship in half, and the stern capsized and remained afloat for the next 20 minutes, with her propellers gleaming in the sun. Hanover, the ship directly astern of Pommern, was forced to haul out of line to avoid the wreck. Pommern's entire crew of 839 officers and enlisted men were killed when the ship sank. She was the only battleship in either fleet to be sunk at Jutland. Her loss, coupled with the vulnerabilities of the surviving pre-dreadnoughts, prompted Scheer to leave them behind during the sortie of August 18th to the 19th of 1916. The ship's bow ornament, which had been removed at the outbreak of the war in July of 1914, is preserved at the Le Beau Naval Memorial.